Good morning, everybody, and just welcome or good afternoon, depending on when you're actually listening to this podcast. Wanted to go ahead and tell you, just kick off with myself really quickly. My name is Mark Mitford. I'm the managing director and founder of HR Catalyst Consulting. But I wanted to introduce to you a friend of mine. I've gotten to know David over the years, but David, I'd love to be able to introduce a good friend of mine and an expert in compensation, David Garza. So, David, tell me a little bit about who you are and what do you do to make a living?
Well, good morning, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this podcast with you, Mark. I'm David Garza. I am the founder and CEO of Compass Human Capital Advisors. We started our practice back in 2011, right at the tail end of the recession of 2008. Was in transition and decided I wanted to do some consulting work. So I helped some small companies in interim HR roles. Took a little bit of a detour. I did a little corporate job for about 5 years and then started the practice back in earnest in 2018, which coincidentally, Mark, as a good friend, was able to ask me to come on board HR Catalyst, act as one of the senior principals. So I do a couple of roles. I do my own practice, or I do help small middle market business owners who are trying to scale their organizations and help guide them with their people issues around that. But then on behalf of Mark, I've done some great work with helping many different players in a vast majority of industries get through their basic HR needs. And so it's been a good ride, Mark. I appreciate that.
Great. Well, thanks so much, David. Yeah, I've really gotten to know you personally and professionally over the years, and I enjoy the relationship. So what was, just out of curiosity, so back in 2011, so you starting your own consulting practice, what was the driving force behind you taking that big leap of faith there out of corporate America into starting your own business?
You know, I'll answer that in two ways, because I'll look at it in 2011 and then 2018. 2011 is more necessity. Was in transition, was looking to fill the void between perhaps finding a different corporate role, and actually enjoyed what I was doing. So I did it for about 2.5 years working with different companies. And unfortunately, I was able to get back into a corporate a role. But in 2018, I think that's where I tapped into my passion. And that was more about helping business owners improve their business through people. But on the flip side, helping people have a better experience through their business or their job or career. And I wasn't doing that, wasn't getting the satisfaction in my corporate job. In my corporate role, you're really impacting only that group of employees around you and your job. This afforded me the opportunity to actually get out and actually try to do more with a greater audience out there.
Yeah, that's great. That's a little bit ironically a little bit of my story, but I know we're not here to learn about me. So we're here to focus on you and really get some expertise and you to share some wisdom. So around compensation. So in today's world, you know, we're here specifically to talk about compensation planning. Compensation itself is a broad topic. And I know there's a lot of facets, especially when we're recording this in 2023. But can you share, when you think about it as as a human resource, human capital expert, what is your 25-cent definition of compensation planning, compensation strategy in your words?
Sure, Mark. I'll speak from the heart here. I think compensation planning and strategy and process is all about ensuring that you're getting a return on the compensation dollar you're spending with your employees. And that means you got to have a good plan, good strategy out there so that you're ensuring that you're competitive and you're getting the work done that you need to as an organization.
Right. No, that is great. So why would you say, especially in 2023 and beyond, why would you say, especially for when you're looking at middle market size companies, let's say $5 to $100 million in revenue, why would you say it's so important for those companies who may not think about compensation that much and really being more strategic around compensation? Why would you say that's so important for them in these the days we live in right now?
I would argue that for a lot of startup companies, margins can be very thin. Every dollar being spent needs to be very deliberate in terms of ensuring you're getting your return. And so that's the same with how you spend your money with your employees. Compensation can't be something that is just done on the back of an envelope or willy nilly. You've got to be very deliberate in making sure you pay people their worth, but you also pay and reward them for getting things done for you, so that your spend is going to be a good spend of the dollar. That's why I think it's important today.
That's great. Thanks so much. So what would you say if you were going to if you were going to put in for our audience, how would, if you were going to say how to put into core buckets of compensation, because it is such a broad definition of just compensation in general, if you were going to really just segment the avenues of compensation for our audience members as business owners and business leaders, what are the core components of compensation and compensation planning from your definition?
There are four that jump out to me immediately. One is compensation philosophy, how you're going to approach your compensation. But let's be candid. The going philosophy out there is pay for performance. I'm going to spend $1 to try to get something out of my employees. So that's one thing, but really understanding what that means and understanding what rewarding employees for performance means. Second thing is your competitiveness. And that means you want to be paying well, but you don't want to be way far out ahead of your competitors, and you want to be competitive. So it's important to have good, accurate data from whatever resource you can find with regard to compensation data. The third component I think is important is compliance. Just know that there are federal laws, the Federal Labor Standards Act, that dictate certain basic things around compensation. But then each state has their own approach to pay in terms of what you do with regard to compensation and irregularity. That's more payroll, but you want to make sure you're compliant when you're putting your plan together with regard to that. And then the other component is actually the structure of employee pay. How do you want to set that up? Is it a design where you have different employees grouped in different levels or grades, and then you pay those individuals somewhat similarly? Or is it in a way that you just kind of take your most important employee and you pay them the highest, and your most clerical employee and pay them the lowest, and kind of stack rank in there? You got to have some structure around how you want to pay your employees. So those are the four components I think of when asked that question, Mark.
Well, that's great. Yeah, no, thanks for that really insightful, very insightful comment, David. So in your opinion, so companies, middle market size companies, and I would say probably lower middle market size companies. So again, let's use a specific example, more of a company that's $30 million in revenue with 200 employees. In your experience, how well do those companies actually do what you're talking about around compensation planning, compensation strategy? How well, if you were going to give them a letter grade, let's say, how well do you think they do on average in that, and really putting the key things around compensation together?
Well, Mark, let me first say it's a mixed bag from what I see out there. You've got some that are doing it very well, and others who are really nonchalant about it. Overall grade I would give is a B, and that's because I do believe a lot of business owners have taken an effort to try to put more structure around their compensation. But I still believe there's opportunity to improve, particularly around a couple of areas of structure, of decision making. And I think as I reflect on some of the clients I've worked with, there's a lot of desire to do it right. There's just not a lot of know-how.
Right. And that's probably where I would imagine that's where somebody like yourself could possibly help in maybe helping them to really think about it from a strategic, from an HR, somebody who's an HR executive level individual who could actually come in there and actually be able to make a really big difference for them.
Most definitely. And I think HR Catalyst has been able to do that. Most of the work that I've done with you, Mark, and HR Catalyst has been around compensation, helping companies achieve that. So
right,
that's very accurate.
Thanks. So why do you think that? Do you think it's the question is kind of like, why do you think that is? Is it simply a situation to where they don't know what they don't know? Or they are so focused on running the business, even if they're the CEO, owner of the business? What are your thoughts on why you think that sometimes it's a B, because it's such an important topic? Why do you think it's you give it that letter grade?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you the answer I'll come up with is that a lot of these business owners didn't get into business to be an HR professional or to be an accounting professional or to be a marketing professional. They had a passion around an idea, a product, or a service. And fortunate for them, it took off. And now they find themselves the head of a company. And they just don't have the know how or the expertise because it wasn't what they were initially out to do. And so I think at that point, any of these different systems like compensation, there's other things like performance management, talent management, just don't get a nod because sometimes they just don't know about it
Mhm.
or they're afraid of it. And I don't mean afraid from a standpoint. It's just I'm afraid I'll get in there and mess things up. And it's also just something I don't enjoy doing. So I think that's why you find some companies are in a situation where they're just not well developed in these other areas like compensation.
Right. No, and I think that's so true. And that's why I think with the role that you play, it's such a critical role, because it's a I think, like you said, every business started from one or two or three employees. Even though the iconic businesses we all know about, and in the Fortune 500 world. But yeah, that's it. They weren't really thinking about. They had a good product, a desire, worked hard, found a market, found customers, and then all of a sudden, 10 years later, they may have a 20, 30, $50 million company, and they're probably like, what in the world? How do I manage all the complexity and develop processes here? So yeah, I think that's a great, really, really insightful. So what we're going to do now, actually, David, is we're going to just take a short break, and then we'll come back to you in just a minute. But we're going to take a short break, and we're going to hear a little something from our sponsor. Thanks so much, David.
Thank you.
You want to grow your business, but people issues are getting in the way. Managing the people side of your business is complex and can feel overwhelming. Does this sound familiar? At HR Catalyst, people strategy is our business. We create and implement a people strategy with you so you can get back to growing your business. HR Catalyst was founded in 2013 with the goal of bringing the best-in-class HR practices to small and middle market companies. We are your outsourced strategic people experts. We help you solve the people issues in your business that are slowing you down. If you have HR concerns, you can schedule a complimentary call on our website at hrcatalystconsulting.com.
So David, thanks so much. We're just coming off of a short break here. So thanks so much for your, I think you're sharing, from my perspective, you shared some really good nuggets, but we wanted to drill into them a little more and in the next probably 10 minutes or so. But so is compensation, compensation planning, is it a system? Is it a process? Is it, what is it? Is it kind of a system and a process? What are your thoughts there? Or is it both? Or maybe I'm not even asking the right question. What are your thoughts there?
No, that's a very insightful question there. My opinion is that compensation is a system that's made up of processes. There are different components to a compensation system. Decision making. There is a process behind decision making. When you promote somebody, when you transfer somebody, when you sometimes demote somebody, what's the process to get that done from a compensation fairness standpoint and a compliance standpoint. Another process is going through at a routine basis, maybe every couple of years, and getting good market data, going through the process of finding a good resource, locating or identifying the jobs that you want to benchmark with getting good data. You don't have to do 100% of your jobs, but you need to do those that are probably the more common ones, and then you can somewhat link the other jobs in your company to do that. And so that's just a couple of examples. There's processes that are all included within an overall compensation system.
Okay. No, that's great. And I really do. No, that's fascinating that you have that explanation. So you mentioned market data and gaining market data. So do you have any recommendations for the audience around where do you get market data from? How do you find that at, and how do you make sure, nowadays, if you Google something, I always tell people be very careful what you look for online, because some of it may have a huge amount of validity and some of it maybe not so much. So do you have a recommendation or recommendations around where you could actually, a business owner could find market data of what the pay is, what's the going rate for an accounting manager, an HR manager, a director of sales?
Yes, yes, Mark. May not like what I'm about to say here, but I have, let me tell you first, I have 50-50 confidence in sites like salary.com or Glassdoor. Those are individuals that are self-reporting. And over time, if you get enough of that information, maybe it becomes more valid. But you don't know whether people are being truthful or accurate in their information. I prefer going to a vendor who actually is in the business of collecting and surveying data and actually scrubbing it to make sure that it's accurate. One of the things I love about working here with HR Catalyst and doing some work with them is that they rely on a company called PayScale, and they do a great job of vetting the information. They'll even share their confidence in how strong the information is. And that's based on how many people or how many roles they were able to market and get data on. So I would encourage, if you're going to go out to market to get data, do it through a provider, a payroll data provider. Little expensive if you go out and do that on your own. One of the nice things about working again with HR Catalyst is that HR Catalyst is able to work and get that information for you at a much reduced cost to a client. But nonetheless, that's where I have more accuracy in terms of talking to my clients about what pay levels and what pay structure for different markets are when you look at market data.
Right. Okay, great. No, that's really helpful to make that recommendation. So now it sounds like, and I'm going to ask the question anyway, but it sounds like so competence, because I know that in the HR consulting space, there's not a lot of people besides maybe compensation specialists, like a compensation company, that actually would delve into compensation. But is it something you actually help business owners with currently?
I currently help business owners through Compass and also with my work with the HR Catalyst on
Mhm.
and designing their compensation. We'll do anything from providing them the data they need, and they can go off and make a decision of their own, to actually building a structure for them and helping them with how they would manage or go through the process of and implementing a compensation plan and dealing with the employees. Um, it's also just we're there to answer questions as an expert for you with regard to how you put that structure together, or we can do that structure for you.
Okay, that's great. So, what would you say on that note, David? Since you can help and make a difference there, for business owners who are listening to this, or business leaders, what would you say who are what are the three, if you were just going to take it down to three reasons, why should they, we're at the beginning of the year, in 2023, of course, you may be seeing this at a different point in time in the year, but at any point in time, whether it's in January or whether it's in July or November, why is it so important? What are three things you would say why it's critically important for a business to actually start doing this now around creating this compensation system? What are your three big critical reasons why this is going to be something they need to get started with now?
Mark, it's a great question, and again, like you said, it doesn't matter when you start; just get started. Number one, if I put my business owner hat on, the number one reason is waste. Are you paying what you need to be paying your employees, and do you have a grounded market data that you can rely on so that you're making those good decisions? And then when you're making decisions, and I see this all too often, sometimes we push the easy button. Let's just give everybody a 3% raise across the board, or let's just not do anything for anyone. all that can be very wasteful with regard to either paying people what they don't or haven't really earned, or when you're not paying, you run the risk of turnover and people leaving. So number one is waste. Number two, I would put into the bucket of, if you can follow me here, both turnover because of inequity. If you don't have a good plan and you've got two people doing the same job with the same background and same experience, and one's getting paid more and the other isn't, there's an inequity that arises there, and that creates turnover. And I think one of the more difficult things to do is to go out and find good talent today. So you want to have a compensation plan that is ensuring that people feel like they're being adequately paid, fairly paid, and that there's objective process in terms of making decisions on pay. And then number three, I think is the other big reason is peace of mind. You want to be able to say that when decisions are being made about compensation, when payroll is running, that if you were ever going to be audited or visited by a regulator, that you can say, I've got a good, fair system in place. I know exactly where everyone's being paid. We're doing things appropriately. We've got good market data, and I feel good at night knowing that we're doing our people right and that we're compliant with the law. And so that's the other reason why I would probably tell you, get your compensation system up and going.
Yeah, I know that's so true. And, it's interesting because you mentioned one of those key things there with that response, David, around turnover. And it's amazing that, quite a few of the averages, and I know it's kind of, a lot of people don't understand the cost of turnover. So it's anywhere between the information that I've seen, and if you have different data points, please share, but it's around $4,000 to $5,000 per hire to get one person in the door. And that, of course, that's on average, because it's going to be different if you're hiring somebody for $14 an hour versus somebody for $100,000 an hour. But on average, when you look at it, all the costs of recruiting, the time to go through the interview process to get them into the payroll system, is so every person you have that you lose, because possibly if you're not paying competitively and somebody comes in and poaches them and raids them from you and is paying them more accurate market data, that's a person you've lost at least. Well, the cost of just hiring, replacing them is $4,000 to $5,000. And I don't know, is that something about what you've seen, David, out there as kind of an industry average?
I wholeheartedly believe so. And add on top of that, which a lot of business owners don't think about, it's the overtime cost. Who's covering that person being gone?
Right.
The cost of lost experience. This person may have been very experienced in what they're doing. Now you got to take some time to get somebody ramped up to that level as well. There's cost there. It's maybe hard to articulate, but you can feel it. It slows you down, and your productivity goes down during that loss. And then also just the impact it may have on your goodwill and reputation with your clients. I liked working with this person. Why aren't they here? I may not want to be with you anymore. So those are costs that are tied into it. But yes, it could be up to $4,000 or $5,000 for that one person gone. So you just want to make sure you'd hang on to your folks.
Right. No, and that's so true. And I love what you just said around, because if this is a very technical job, and technical could be a lot of things. One of my clients I just started working with, they do a lot of welding. They have a lot of welders. But if you have somebody who's doing, high-end welding, I've worked with companies in the aerospace field that do aerospace manufacturing on parts, and they use some CNC machine operators and machinists. Those you can't replace them, within a couple of days. So if you find a really skilled welder, somebody who's a CNC operator who's using a computer machine to actually weld precision parts for like an F-35 or what have you, they're not hanging off of a tree outside your door. So sometimes the cost can be, the cost of replacement is minimal, just the core cost, but then the cost of knowledge and experience can be $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 for that individual, and all that productivity and the lost experience and getting things done. So that's huge. With that, David, thanks so much for this conversation. It's been hugely insightful for me. I've learned, the thing I love about doing this too, I learned a few things along the way too. So Any final thoughts on the topic before we move to some round robin kind of fun questions to wrap things up?
Not at all, other than the fact that compensation doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be hard. Don't be afraid of it, but get somebody who knows what they're doing in there to help you. And once it's implemented, it's hopefully something that it's gonna bear fruit for you.
Great. No, that's perfect. So okay, we're going to move on to some. I don't know if they're softballs or not. Sometimes they're a little bit harder than they should be. But with that, so what are three books you'd recommend that the audience should actually go ahead and read, and why should they read these three books that are kind of like your favorites?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to look up on my bookshelf here. I will tell you, number one, impactful book for me was Good to Great. By Collins. It was a great book and a great read. Really taught me a lot more about, how companies get their momentum going. The other one is by Patrick Lencioni. It's The Five Misfunctions of a Team. That was very important in my time during the corporate life to understand how to get the executive teams working together with regard to, what they do as a team together. And then Team of Teams was an important book for me. It was from General McChrystal. It was more about an experience of him in combat and how complex the battlefield is today. And you had to work less with the traditional structure of a military, and you had to work with a team of teams. So there were some good nuggets in that book as well. And forgive me because I'm probably messing up some of the titles with that, but those are three books that have been most impactful.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. Thanks for that. So two podcasts. I'm not sure if you're a person that listens to podcasts, but if so, are there any two podcasts podcast series that you enjoy listening to?
Gosh, you got me. I'm not a regular podcast listener. I do like the TED Talks. I think that's just a gimme. I enjoy some of those different topics that are out there. And I'm kind of a historical buff. I like listening to some podcasts just for the history. And there's a current series with a journalist named Mo Rocca, and he talks a little bit about some old historical things that have gone by the wayside, and kind of explains why they've gone by the wayside. That's a little enjoyable for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, thanks for that. So, what advice would you give your 16-year-old self today?
What advice would I give my 16-year-old self today? I would tell him to just keep plugging away. Unfortunate for me, I've everything that I've done has been very deliberate. At times, unsure, maybe lacked confidence of whether I was doing the right thing. But you just keep moving forward. And there have been some times where I haven't. Sometimes I've missed some opportunities as well. But just to keep moving forward, keep taking that step forward, and don't let fear or uncertainty dictate that.
Great. No, that's perfect. Thank you. That's great advice for your 16-year-old self, I'd imagine. So great advice for 16-year-olds today, period. Last one. And so what is your favorite 80s band?
Oh, my favorite 80s band. I'm thinking of some that were in the 70s that were making music in the 80s, but for a band that was created in the 80s, I would tell you the Police, Sting. They came out around 1980, and I really enjoyed their music as they were going through. But I'm always a diehard Eagles fan. And,
okay, well, there you go.
Yeah. I recently became a good Journey fan too. So those were out of the 70s, but they had some good songs in the 80s as well.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, so last thing for you, before we wrap up, if there's any audience members who want to reach out to you directly, how can they connect with you online, through email? What is the best way to connect with you?
Sure. You can connect with me personally through my email. It's david.garza@compasshca.com. And then you can check out a little bit about my background and what we do at www.compasshca.com as well. But appreciate the time, Mark. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And you were easy. I appreciate that.
No, I think this has been a great conversation. I'm enjoying doing this, and I learn something new every time. I honestly, very sincerely, I learned something new about my craft too. But I think it's a lot of fun. And David, thanks again for your time. And for the audience, thanks again for your time. And we look forward to putting together another session next month. And stay tuned. And we'll look forward to sharing more insightful information from our next guest. Thanks so much, David. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Mark.